everybody. So I'm gonna do a demo on drawing with colored pencils, and before I start, I just want to go over some of the materials that can be used for drawing. So first off, I have my piece of paper. It's just for my sketchbook, and I have the Prismacolor set. This is the 12 color Prismacolor set. As well as these colors, I really like to add, here's a couple that I'm adding, and I like to have, with these colors, I feel like I can get a really good range of mixes. One of them is a processed red. This is PC994, and for Prismacolor. This one I can really create nice violets. I can also add this to or over this red and kind of create a nice cooler red with this, because this is a warm red, and so this helps to create violets, different shades of violets mixed with those pencils, and nice pinkish reds. And I just have some various shades of gray. I have a 70% cool gray right here. I have a 90% warm gray, and then I also have a 90% cool gray or cold gray. And these help to create shadows, darkening areas, or just when you need gray. Another good color to add is, let's see here. I don't have it with me, but it's a dark yellow that's kind of a brownish yellow. That also helps too. And then, really important, I have my Viewfinder, which helps me to decipher colors. This is really important and can really take the guesswork out of what color you think you see. Oftentimes, simultaneous contrast makes things a little bit harder to see, because when a color is surrounded by other colors, you have a hard time. It's a kind of a phenomenon where we have a hard time with our perception to understand the color that it is, because the other colors around it change the way we perceive that color, a certain color. So this is a really simple but easy tool. So I cut this out of half of a sheet of my sketchbook. And then what I did was I cut a 1/4 inch square in the center. It's very easy but super useful. And then I have my paper stumps and some sandpaper so that I can make sure that I sand off the previous color I used before I start blending in other colors. So I have those. It's important to have a pencil sharpener because you want to keep your pencils nice and sharp as you work with them. I have my pink pearl eraser and my kneaded eraser. Good old kneaded eraser. So you can erase certain times when you're working with Prismacolor only when they're really light. Once you start getting darker and darker, it's much harder to erase, and it will not erase completely. I also have some of my paintbrushes. This one is the number 2 round. Here's the number 6 round. Here's a 3/4 flat brush in case I want to use some rubbing alcohol in order to blend my colors or soften them or move them around just a bit into the grain of the paper and get maybe like a little bit of a watery effect too, just kind of. I also have my Q-tips right here, a couple of those, so that I can use that rubbing alcohol with those, or if I want to blend with them. And I have a couple paper towels, which are good for blending larger areas. Get a nice soft blend. And if you like, you can get a pocket guide to mixing colors. This is a really nice tool. You can get these at different art stores, order them online, or you can just look online for just as a resource while you're drawing, so that you know what opposite colors you need if you want to dull a color or neutralize it. So this is the photograph that I'm going to work from. I'm going to draw this Mr. Potato Head, and the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing my line work and just kind of drawing out the placement of everything. So Mr. Potato Head is kind of orangey brown, so I'm going to start out with this light color orange, and I'm going to start just kind of mapping out the area, and I'm drawing really lightly. So you can see here that I have my line work sketched out. So I've got the general layout of everything, and I just used I've done it really lightly. You can see I made a couple mistakes. I just used my eraser. If you mark really light, you will be able to do that to kind of fix your mistakes, right? And then once it gets all colored in, those things will set back and it won't be really matter so much. I'm going to start laying in or just kind of mapping out some of these darker areas, some of the shadows. And I'm going to mark a couple of these highlighted areas as well. It's kind of a reflected highlight right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the closest that I have to the local color. So the local color of the nose is red. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to really softly start going in with that red. And you can see my pencil's on its side, so that way I don't. So I want to start layering. So I start out making really light circles in there, and you can already see that this red is kind of a dark red. And again, you really want your pencils to stay sharp. So one of the ways that I do that is as I'm coloring, I'm turning my pencil around and around so that I'm getting all the surfaces. And here's where I'm going to use my viewfinder, because I feel like right under the nose there's this kind of reflected highlight, and it looks kind of orange to me. I'll apply a little more pressure right here where that shadow is, and fade it out right there. So Mr. Potato right about here has a brown, that's the edge of the nose. Right here is a slight yellow, this white. And I have a blender. I was kind of showing you guys that in my last video. It is a colorless blender. I'm going to start using that in here. Again, you don't have to have a blender. This is just a tool that I really like. You can see how it's kind of darkening that red. You could also use your paper stump. So I did this part, this red, but I feel like I need to kind of warm it up with a little bit of that orange. And here, this shadow is pink. Kind of pink quality to it. And I've got a little burnishing going on right there. So right about here, got kind of a shadow. I'm using the violet just to add some dark. And this is really bringing out form in the nose. So So it's really about the values. It doesn't have to be the exact color, but I'm using color. This is a dark color, and so I'm using that to create some shading effects in the nose right here. You could use a brown, but you can see that there's really starting to be a form to it. So underneath, I might use my dark brown, kind of get that shadow in. So I'm gonna start moving around where it gets really, late, and what I'm gonna do is start coloring in the brown of this is his kind of localized color. I'm going in really light because I'm gonna have to add layers to this later. So I'll kind of designate those shadows again with my dark brown. So for shadows, what you can do is for shadows and shaded areas, you can use, these are different various grays. I have a violet and a blue, a brown. When you add the blue, the darker blue with the orange, you get a nice black. For this same blue with the brown, you get even darker black. So these are really good for shadow areas. And then there's black itself. I like to hold back on the black and not use the black as much. Because I don't want it to get too, I will wait for the end to use the dark black if I need it at all. Oftentimes I don't. There's a black crayon in this image that Mr. Potato is holding, and it is showing up pretty black in the photo, so I will probably use it for that. You can tell the black of the crayon is very different than any of the other shadow areas. It's more of a jet black. If you want to desaturate any of the colors, you can use the opposites, your pocket mixing guide, so you can see that opposite of yellow is violet, opposite of blue is orange, opposite of green is red. So it's helpful in that way to use that if you need it. And then you can also add other colors if you want to bring down the intensity of a color. Like for this green, I used a lighter gray. For this blue, I used a darker gray. And for this orange, I used a brown. Black also will bring down the saturation too. But again, you want to hold back on black and not use that if you don't have to. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my light brown. Get that shadow in. Has a soft edge, that shadow, so I'm going to hold this on the side. So I'm adding a little bit of violet into that shadow just to push that shadow a little deeper under the cap. Again, it doesn't have to be the exact color. I don't necessarily in my photograph see that shadow being violet, but the violet adds a little. Now I'm kind of working with the contours of his shape when I'm working with my marks and when I'm blending. You don't want to press too hard with the blending stump because you want to still layer more colors on top. You don't want to make it to where you push the fibers of the paper so far down and compress them that you can't continue to layer on top. So you want to be kind of light with this too, not too hard. It is actually a light gray. There's actually just a tiny bit of red from the nose reflected underneath here. I'm actually going to pull out the black right here. So with the black, I burnished over here and got it really black, but then I left it kind of a light pressure here because as the eyeball rounds, even though that's jet black on the toy, it becomes a little bit lighter. Alright, so what I did was I added a little bit more. I went over with a few more layers, probably about 3 or 4. I'm still not done. It's all about adding those layers. But I wanted to show you what I did was with the highlight, I added a little more yellow right here and a little more orange on top of the brown right here and kind of about here. So what that does is it kind of brings the form out and rounds it a little bit more. So the highlights, I saw in the photograph a little bit yellow there on the eye, on the upper eye. In our drawing, we're replicating our perception of what we see. We are visualizing something onto a 2D surface. And sometimes you really do see some violet in the shadow. Sometimes you really do see blue in the shadow. The best thing always is to look at the actual object, and in doing so, you're going to get the clearest image of what you want to do and how you want to replicate that onto the paper when we're drawing realistically. But the one thing to know is it is a drawing. It is our version of what we see. And everybody has a different version in their mind's eye of how they see the world. And so we are creating our own interpretation. Now you do still want to get the proper values. Again, remember, values how we see the world around us. Those lights and dark help us to determine where objects are sitting in space and how we navigate through our world. So even if you do use a different color, it might have the impressionistic style, right, by using different colors, but it'll feel real as an object that sits in space. And then I want to talk about, like, for example, the crayon. It's the one place I used black in the eyes because it was actually black ink that was screened onto those eyes, and it is a black crayon. But as this crayon, let you get a little closer view. As this crayon rounds, that black turns into a gray where the highlight is. And also in the highlight right here, as it merges into the black, I actually saw a bit of orange. So I very lightly, right here, there's actually a little bit of yellow because it's bouncing off of the paper. So colors are bouncing everywhere, back and forth, all over the place. We got it going on. So since the hat is in a apple green basically, I'm going to use this to pull out those highlight shapes. There's a bit of a shadow right here, so I'm going to do a little brown and a little blue just to kind of get that in there. You can see this highlight is a very, very light green, so I have the green and I used the white for this highlight, but this one I left the white of the paper because it's the lightest highlight. Right here you can see there's a reflection from the yellow onto the bottom of the pants. All right, so I'm pretty much done. I think I'm done. And I have, as you can see, actually I just want to say thanks for sticking with me and watching me through this. You can see that I had gone over this with many, many, many layers. The shoes, I started out with a lighter blue, and then I moved in on top of that with a darker blue, and then on top of that with a dark brown to get those really, really dark areas that you see in there. That is my dark brown on top of the blue violet, and this is my lighter blue that came in our kit. So that is the true blue, and I left the white where the lightest highlights were, but not all the highlights were super white. A lot of them were kind of like a lighter blue and ended up being kind of that true blue. Right here I have that true blue with a white on top of it. I may go over and take some of those down a little bit. In the picture it's not as dramatic, but I kind of like how shiny the shoes look. It really makes the object look shiny, and you can see how the lights hit the darks really fast and create almost certain edges, right? Versus here, where the shading here, he's not as shiny of a plastic. It has a texture on it, and you can see from the lighter colors into the darker, there's more of a blending happening. On the nose, I have reds, oranges, there's some blue, violet in there for the shading, dark browns under the nose. I may darken that just a little bit. In here, we have a lot of different colors as well, blues, violets, browns, and all those shadows. In the hat, I have white, gray, blue, and a little bit, tiny bit of brown, not really very much. The eyes are black, but I released some of the texture to be really light-handed in the center of the eye, and then moved into a harder texture on the paper, pressure on the paper with the pencil to get a nice dark black. And then I used black here. Otherwise, I didn't really use black anywhere. On the hands, I used like super light gray, just being really, really, really delicate, barely getting any on there, using the pencil on its side like this. So I used a 70% gray. If I would have had a lighter gray, like a 50% gray or something like that, I would have used it instead, but I don't. And then I used my paper stump blender and kind of smeared it in. Here's white I left. Here's some orange, right? So in the photo, there's a lot of like kind of areas where there's yellow and orange between. And then also the yellow of the paper is bouncing up onto the bottom of him. Some of the red of the nose is in here in the eyeballs on the very underneath. I'll try to bring the camera a little bit closer so that you can kind of see more of the colors inside. So you can see even in my shadow right here, there's some yellow. And that's why you achieve a lot of really nice colors, and it doesn't look like it's just straight out of the box. I also have my lamp right there that has helped give me some illumination so that I can clearly see the colors, because without light, there are no colors. All right, thank you. Have a good week.